Ah, there you are, ready for a dose of chills and bad decisions. Who hasn't seen a cozy cabin in the snow, or heard a knock at the door and thought, seems safe, I'll check it out? Yeah, brilliant decisions like these make for great stories, for the ones who survived anyway. Today I'm taking you through dark alleys, silent forests, and situations so bizarre they'd make evil itself think, whoa, that's too much. So sit back and relax, or don't.
It all started in the winter of 2019. My best friend Sabrina and I decided to go hiking in the Appalachian Mountains near the Great Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. It was a bold idea, but the promise of snow-covered landscapes was irresistible. The forecast predicted moderate snowfall, nothing two experienced hikers couldn't handle. The forest's silence was mesmerizing. Only the rhythmic crunch of our boots in the fresh snow broke the stillness. Nature feels like it's hiding secrets when it's this quiet, Sabrina joked. She was more right than she knew. After hours of hiking, the snowfall turned heavier, much heavier. The gray sky descended on us, and within minutes, we were completely disoriented. The GPS stopped working, and our map became useless once it got wet. The storm erased our tracks while icy winds stung our faces. That's when Sabrina pointed at something in the distance, a faint light between the trees. "It's a cabin!" she exclaimed, breathless. But for reasons I couldn't explain, something inside me knew we shouldn't go there. The cabin looked like something out of a postcard, small, with dark wooden walls and a thin plume of smoke rising from the chimney. The windows were fogged, but a warm glow illuminated the interior. "It looks so inviting," Sabrina said, smiling. As we approached, a chill ran through me. There were no footprints in the snow around the cabin, no signs of who might have lit the fire or opened the door. Everything was eerily still, yet charged with something indescribable. Still, we had no choice. The storm forced us to seek shelter. Sabrina pushed the door open, and it creaked softly. Inside, it was small but cozy. A fire crackled in the hearth, there was a table with 2 chairs, and a bed was neatly made. But something felt deeply wrong. The smell, old wood mixed with a faint metallic tang, like rusting iron. "This is a miracle," Sabrina said, warming her hands by the fire. But I couldn't relax. It felt like we were being watched. While Sabrina found some folded blankets in the corner and wrapped herself up, I began inspecting the details around us. That's when I noticed something unsettling. The windows were completely frozen from the outside, but there was no snow on the roof. It didn't make sense. I told Sabrina we should leave at dawn. She laughed. "You think there's something worse than this storm out there?" At that moment, we heard it. Light footsteps in the snow outside. Sabrina froze. The firelight, once bright, now seemed dimmer, casting long shadows across the floor. I grabbed my phone to use as a flashlight, but it still had no signal. We moved closer to the window, trying to see outside. All we could make out was a vast, white blur. When we turned back to the room, we noticed the door was slightly ajar. I was sure we had locked it. We spent the rest of the night wide awake, sitting near the fire. Every sound from outside made my heart race. But the worst was yet to come. Just before dawn, Sabrina noticed something on the table. A cup. It hadn't been there before. "Did you put this here?" she asked, her voice trembling. I shook my head, fear tightening in my throat. Suddenly, the door swung open with force. Outside in the snow, we saw something. Or someone. There was no visible face, just a tall figure wrapped in a thick coat and hood that obscured everything. Sabrina started screaming, but the figure remained still, just watching us. We slammed the door shut and pushed the table against it. The footsteps continued, circling the cabin. It felt like whatever it was waiting for the right moment. When daylight finally broke, we grabbed our things and ran. The figure was gone, but the tracks in the snow showed it had stayed all night, pacing around the cabin. Hours later, exhausted, we reached a ranger station. We told the ranger what had happened, but his reaction was even more disturbing. He listened in silence and, when we finished, said, "There are no cabins in that part of the forest." We returned to the location with him but found nothing, just untouched snow, as if the cabin had never existed. To this day, I don't know what we encountered that night. But if you ever find yourself lost in the woods and see a cabin that seems inviting, keep walking. Some doors are better left unopened.
It happened during the winter of 2020, in one of the worst snowstorms I'd ever experienced. My family and I were living in an old house on the outskirts of Duluth, Minnesota. Surrounded by tall pine trees, the house was always wrapped in a peculiar silence, amplified by the snow blanketing everything. I had always found it comforting. The storm began late in the afternoon and quickly escalated. We were gathered in the living room, warmed by the fireplace, watching the snow pile up outside the window. My kids, Mia and Ben, loved winter. They even asked to camp out in the living room near the window to watch the snow. I thought it was a charming idea. Before going to bed, we did our usual routine, locked all the doors and windows. We didn't want the wind to push anything open or let snow drift inside. It seemed like an ordinary night, but something in the back of my mind felt off. The next morning, the storm had calmed. Everything was still until Mia called me from upstairs. Her voice was shaky. "Dad, there are footprints on the roof." I laughed, thinking she was imagining things. But when I got closer to the window, my smile vanished. There they were. Large footprints, clearly human, imprinted in the snow on the roof. They started near the edge and ended close to the chimney. The most unsettling part? There were no tracks on the ground to show how someone had climbed up. My wife, Liz, tried to brush it off. Maybe it was a big animal, she suggested. But I knew that wasn't it. The prints were too clear, too human. I spent the day trying to shake it off. We made hot chocolate. The kids played in the snow-covered yard, and I focused on our usual routines. But as I shoveled the driveway, something strange struck me. The snow around the house was completely untouched. No footprints, not even from the kids who had just been playing there. It was as if no one had been near the house all day except for the tracks on the roof. That night, while we were watching a movie, we heard it. A loud thump from the roof. Ben shouted, "Someone's walking up there!" I rushed upstairs but saw nothing. I waited a few minutes in silence, straining to hear the sound again. Nothing. Liz suggested it might just be the weight of the snow shifting, but the feeling that we were being watched lingered. On the third night, I woke up to a sound. Something was scratching at the window of our bedroom. I looked at Liz. She was awake, frozen in fear. My heart racing, I got up and approached the window. Nothing, just snow piling up. But then we heard Mia scream. I ran to her room. She was crying, pointing at the window. There was a face outside. When I pulled back the curtain, there was no one there. But in the snow outside the second-story window were footprints that shouldn't have been there. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside to check. As I shined the light on the roof, I saw them again. Fresh footprints. They looked as if they'd been made moments ago. But once again, there were no tracks leading up or down. The next morning, I called the police. 2 officers arrived and conducted a thorough inspection. They were just as puzzled. The untouched snow around the house made it impossible for someone to have reached the roof without leaving other tracks. One of the officers, visibly uneasy, mentioned something that sent chills down my spine. She said the house had a history. Before we bought it, the previous owners reported strange occurrences, especially during the winter months. We tried to go on with our lives, but the footprints kept appearing. Always on the roof, always unexplained. There was no clear pattern, but the constant sense of being watched became unbearable. After 2 weeks, we decided we couldn't stay there anymore. We sold the house the following summer and never looked back. To this day, whenever I see snow covering a roof, I can't help but wonder, what if something is still up there waiting?
My life has always been normal, you know. Work, home, bills to pay. But last winter, something happened to me and my family that still keeps me up at night. It was January, in the dead of winter, when we decided to spend a few days at our family's old countryside house in Maine. We wanted to disconnect, enjoy the peace, and let the kids play in the snow. It seemed like a good idea, but the reality was very different. On the third day, a storm hit without warning. It wasn't just a gentle snowfall. It was the kind of storm where the wind howls through the window cracks and the wooden walls groan under the weight of time. We were completely snowed in. The cell phone signal disappeared, and it felt like the world outside had ceased to exist. With each passing hour, the silence grew heavier, as as though something was holding the sound in the air. And then it started. It was nighttime. The fire was crackling in the hearth. The kids had gone to bed, and my wife Kate and I were finishing a game of cards. I remember the exact moment because it was the sound that made me stop mid-move. 3 knocks on the front door. The sound was firm and rhythmic. I looked at Kate, who seemed just as confused as I was. Who could it be, out here in the middle of a snowstorm at 10 at night? I grabbed a flashlight and walked to the door. When I opened it, all I saw was fog. There were no tracks in the snow, no sound other than the wind. I went back inside, laughing nervously. Probably just the wind, or maybe a branch fell, I said, trying to brush it off. Kate didn't seem convinced, but didn't argue. We tried to forget about it. The next night it happened again. 3 knocks identical to the night before. This time I rushed to the door, but once again, nothing. Just the wind and that dense, almost tangible fog. When I turned back to the living room, Kate was holding a fireplace poker. "Just in case," she said, but her face betrayed her fear. On the 3rd night, everything changed. The knocking didn't come alone. This time we heard footsteps on the porch. They weren't light. They were heavy, deliberate, like boots stomping on the wooden planks. I mustered the courage to shout, "Who's there?" The footsteps stopped. I shone my flashlight through the window and nearly dropped it. Through the fog, I saw a shadow, tall, unmoving, watching the house. When I turned to call Kate, the shadow vanished. The next morning, we found footprints in the snow circling the house. The strangest part, they didn't lead anywhere. They started and ended in the middle of nowhere. We decided it was time to leave, but the storm didn't let up. The wind seemed to carry a different sound now, whispers, faint but unsettling. The kids started asking what was going on. "It's just the wind," I lied. That night the knocking returned, but this time it wasn't just 3 knocks. It was relentless, as if something or someone was demanding to be let inside. Kate began to cry. I had never seen her like that before, and for the first time I felt real terror. I grabbed the flashlight and the poker and approached the door. But before I could open it, I heard something. A voice. Raspy, weak, but clear, as if it were speaking directly into my mind. "Why are you here?" Frozen in place, I stepped back. I don't know how, but we made it through the night. When the sun finally rose, we packed our things in a rush. We didn't even bother making coffee. We just wanted to leave. As we loaded the car, I glanced back at the house. In the fog, I saw the shadow again. This time, it was closer, and it wasn't alone. There were other figures around it. We drove to the main road without looking back. We've never returned to that house. In fact, I don't even know if it's still standing. All I know is that whenever winter comes and the fog begins to roll in, I lock every window and pray it doesn't find me again.
So, supernatural thrill seeker, did this send shivers down your spine? Maybe that's because some stories cling to your mind, like snow that never melts. And when the silence of the night feels too eerie, remember, not every mystery needs solving. Now, before something or someone decides to knock on your door, like, share, and subscribe. Spread the fear, because facing the unknown alone, no one deserves that, right? Oh, and good luck to those who still think snowy cabins or footprints on rooftops are a good idea. You're either brave or wildly optimistic. Good luck with that.